Okay, so to start on this Lab 0202, couple different exercises, couple different pieces to this. The first piece is to model the collections in a diagram. Um, this modeling process is a very normal process for normalized databases. It's less common with Mongo databases. However, it's still a good exercise to kind of think through the entities that you want and the attributes that they have and their relationships to one another. So just to get us thinking about this, now there's some different tools that you can use. Oomlet is one that's for free, and I'll kind of walk us through using Oomlet. Um, it's a free download, so you can kind of go out here and download this for free. And this is, again, this is going to help us kind of model our data in the different collections that we have. So it looks like a standalone piece here. So let's go ahead and download this into our downloads. So we can start thinking about what we want to build. Let that finish downloading. Come on. Okay, finish the download, and I'm going to extract this. This is going into my downloads folder. And so if I go into downloads and I look at the unzipped file, Oomlet, you get down to the executable here. Now, what I might do, because I don't want to kind of open this up each time, I'm going to send this as a shortcut to my desktop. I'll say send to desktop, create a shortcut. And so I should be able to now get to Oomlet and launch it off of my desktop. So I don't have to go back into downloads each time. I don't think it installs it under all programs. So launch Oomlet, and this is the first time you're seeing this software. So um, we'll get to this point where it's launched, and we're going to walk through some modeling between our entities. Okay, so we got Oomlet open here, and going back to the requirements, what we know is that there are at minimum users and bugs. And so those are our collections. And again, we're just making a diagram with attributes and relationships between these entities. And so this answer doesn't have to be, again, this is a draft. And so I'm fully expecting changes to this throughout the semester. This is by no means, your final solution. This is just showing you the tool and getting us started. Um, and so, what we do in Oomlet is, uh, again, kind of drag this object onto the canvas, and you can kind of see this is a starting point for our classes. These are our entities, and so um, we can delete this. I didn't mean to do that. And so you make changes to your entities here, and so pretty much this is a simple entity, and you can have attributes. You modify the attributes right here, and uh, by changing this properties window, it changes what you see in our diagram. Um, so, probably want to start off with a user. Let me kind of get this here, get this here. And so our first entity would be user. Notice by changing, uh, click on the box and change this first line of text. This is our user entity. And these two lines basically get the underline under the user. And so you kind of say, hey, this is an entity, and then what are its attributes underneath it? And so going back to the requirements, it says, hey, you'll have a uh, user ID. So we would change this to underscore ID. And this is going to be so you would say underscore ID, that's the name of the property, colon, and then you put the data type. And so this will be object ID. And so that'll be a Mongo object ID. Um, After that, again, just going back to the requirements, we're going to have an email, which would be a string, password would be a string, full name, given name, and a role. And again, kind of going off of our requirements, email, password, make sure we got it, email, password, full name, given name, family name, and role. So that gets us going on on this. Now, when it comes to Oomlet, um, there's going to be multiple files for this lab. And so you're going to upload a folder to me. It's going to be a zipped folder. So go ahead and at this point, let's go ahead and just make a folder. You might put it, um, you might just kind of put it in your on your desktop, wherever you want to put it. But I'll call it lab 02-02. Okay, and we're going to put all the files for this lab in this folder. That ultimately we're going to zip the folder and send it uh, to inside Rankin when we're done. Now, when you're working with Oomlet, there's basically two ways to save your work. Notice right now it's not saved. I'm going to do File, Save As. And I'm going to save this into that folder that I just created, Lab 0202. And notice the format is an Oomlet diagram format, or UXF. And so I'll just call this schema.uxf. Okay, and this is saving it in a file format for Oomlet, but you might also want it in like a JPEG. So if you want to actually save the image, don't click on the diagram. Click off of the entity, right? Otherwise, it's just going to save that. But click off of your entity. Just kind of have it saved here, and then you do File, Export as, maybe JPEG, and this will be schema.jpg. So when I look in this folder, you see a UXF. That's, you open that in Oomlet to make modifications, and if I open up the JPEG, you can see it's got our model that we've kind of been working on. Okay, now the next entity that we need is bug. So I'll drag another object class on here, uh, and this will be for the bugs collection. Now, um, let's mark this as the users collection, therefore this will be the bugs, plural. And let's go back to the requirements of our bugs. Here you can see a lot of the requirements, so I'm going to be pulling from those requirements. Bugs will have an ID, underscore ID, which will be an object ID. And suppose I'm going to capital the O on object ID. A bug will have a title, string. When it comes to a bug, you could have an author of the bug. So what you know call that bug author. You could say the bug was reported by whoever created the bug, reported the bug. And so you know the I think author of bug. Now the bug author is an object ID. Which you could have an array here of users, right? So we call this excuse me, not an array. It's a bug author object. And so here you could have a nested object with a ID, object ID, and the fields you include here, you don't need to include every field from your user, but if a bug has a bug author and it's a nested object, you get to decide, well, hey, maybe I don't need the, maybe I just need the full name here. And maybe role, so this is flexible. What and then so what answers that question is when you're looking at a bug, you know, what fields from the bug author are you going to be displaying? Um, you know, I posted an important rule of thumb, right? The rule of thumb when modeling your data in Mongo, data that is accessed together should be stored together. And so that's such an important note here. You know, I would even, you know, do something like this. And, whoops. I'm just going to put this out here because this is an important data that is accessed together is stored together. And so this is just our rule of thumb that, why am I bringing this up now? Well, when you're displaying a bug on your front end, what information about the bug's author are you going to be using? You might not need their password. In fact, I know you won't need their password, but you might need the full name and the user's role. I don't know. This is flexible. But the point is, bug author is a nested, or could be a nested object, and that's how you would go about making those decisions. What else do we have? Okay, so bug author. We also have a steps to reproduce. We also have a classification. which is a string. We also have a created at, which is a date. So when the bug was created. In those requirements, you might have noticed you can have priorities, P1 through P4. So you could set up priority, which is a string. Maybe that's part of yours, maybe it's not. It said can have, you might not. Let's see, we got created at, let's say updated at, because every time you update a bug, updated at is a date. So what is modeling? What are we doing here? We're kind of taking those requirements which were given from the user, and we're making a model, which is a picture of what we're going to create. We're creating this diagram of the data that will ultimately be stored in the database. And so that's the process that we're going through. So a bug has an ID, a title. Let's put in a description for our bug. Again, this is our draft. Reported by, which is our bug author. Assigned to, a bug can also be assigned. So I'm going to take this nested object that is the author of the bug, and I'm just going to kind of paste it at the bottom. I'll put our nested objects at the bottom. So our bug author, a bug can also be assigned to. Assigned to, and this will be a nested object with object ID. And we don't need the parentheses here. And again, the data that's in here is flexible. Maybe we need the full name, the string, and the role is a string. And maybe you need the email. I'm not sure, probably not actually. Okay, so a bug has an ID, a title, a description, steps to reproduce, classification, created at, updated at, priority. Bug author is a nested object, assigned to is a nested object. So we also have maybe time spent, which is like maybe hours, hours to fix, which would be an array of maybe integers or doubles, or basically a number, because in JavaScript we can basically say, hey, we need a numeric data type. So we have maybe an array of hours to fix. Let's kind of expand this out. You can see there's kind of a lot going on with our bugs. A bug, when you're going through its test cases, we haven't addressed our test case, so let's call an array of test case. Actually here, hours to fix is a number array. So the identifier is ours to fix, and the data type is a number array. Um, we could have our test case. Now our test cases, again, it could be a separate, you could have a separate entity for test case, or it could be a nested document, but I'll make it nested. So I'll have an array of objects. And here, our object will have an underscore ID. It'll have a test case, maybe a test name, which is a string, and it needs a created on, which will be a date, and a passed attribute, which is Boolean, true or false. Since we have an array, we'll make this plural test cases. Okay. The next thing that we will typically do is talk about relationships between entities. So in modeling, you have these different arrows that can represent different things, such as inheritance, right? So in C Sharp, you've got object oriented. You got parent classes and child classes. So arrows can represent relationships between entities. And one typical thing that you'll see in these modeling diagrams are what are called cardinality. In cardinality, you've heard, if you watch the video, there's one to one, there's one to many, or what they call one to squillions now, and then you got many to many. But traditionally, it's one to one, it's one to many, or it's many to many. And those are kind of the different cardinalities you can have between entities. Um, so, um, before I do cardinality, I just want to make sure I've got all of my bugs. Um, One thing that I might be missing is a status, and so a status would be like open or closed. Steps to reproduce, classification, created, edited at a priority. I'm going to add a status. Again, open or closed. I think that's a Discord feature. Um, So the way that we can begin with these cardinalities, these relationships, again, you can just do file save. That'll save the UML diagram in the UXF file format. All these arrows, you can just drag one of them. Um, that's not what I want. So this line right here is what I'm going to start with. So if I double click it, this kind of shows cardinality between two entities. This is So this says teaches to. So, well, it's not teaches, right? Users create bugs. So you can change this to what happens. Creates. Users create bugs, and you kind of get that little arrow. Now, um, when it comes to users and bugs, a user can create many bugs, but a bug only belongs to one user. And so this cardinality goes both ways. It says a user, um, this says 0 to many. Well, you can kind of interpret here. Um, that's ML 0 dot dot n. Well, you can't have 0 users creating many bugs. You need one user. So I would say 1 dot dot n. And this would say one user can create any number of bugs. Um, but a bug, so this would say, so the cardinality going one way from user to bug, but it has to go also back the other way from bug to user. So one user can create many bugs, but if you're looking at this side, on the right hand side, one bug belongs to one user. So it goes from right to left. One bug dot 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 belongs to one user. So I would change this 0 to a 1. And this begins to show those relationships. Now, what does that ultimately mean for your code is what you have to ask. You could see over here in users, one user can create many bugs. Um, so we may, um, depending on our application, again, data that is accessed together should be stored together. You may have, when you're showing a user, you may want to show all of the bugs that user created. Okay, therefore that's going to modify this diagram to say, hey, created bugs is an array of bug objects. And this would be the bug ID. And maybe the title. And again, what information does your application show? Again, when you're showing an individual user and you're looking at all the bugs that they created, maybe you want just the title and the uh, whether it's opened or closed, So maybe you want the status. So again, I don't have I don't have all the answers. I just have a draft of hey, and so that's where this cardinality helps. It's like, hey, our one user can have many bugs. So how that affects our code is I needed to add a property for created bugs, which is an array of bug objects. Um, and one bug has one user. So going the other way, we already have accounted for that, right? So our bug has a bug author, which is the user object ID, the user full name, and the user role, right? So there's a little cardinality demonstration, and I think a really good example of how that affects the code. Because a lot of times you just see these as like lines on a picture, and it's like, what does that mean? Okay. Now, this is a draft. This is my draft. Your draft might not be the same. It may very well be the same. Again, I expect this to change throughout the course of the semester. But is this is a start. And so when you save this, keep in mind you got to save it two ways. Number one, save the UXF file, And then number two, you want to export as, and maybe, I think I did a JPEG, a schema JPEG. I want to open that JPEG just to make sure that the picture matches what I created. Another thing that's worth noting, these cardinality, they have different different identifiers. So this 1 to n being many, 1 to 1. You could have many to many, which obviously would be n dot dot n. This is one style of cardinality, but there's also what's called crow's foot notation, which is just a different symbols that represent the same numbers. So this one's pretty straightforward, I think. And I think the tricky part about this is it goes both ways. You have to go from users to bugs, which is represented right here on the left, and you have to go from bugs to users, bugs back to users. One bug can belong to one user. Okay, now this is not the end of Lab 0202, but it does kind of address the all database entities, documents and subdocuments, relationships, cardinality, properties, data types. Primary key is underscore ID and listed at the top. Upload both the UXF file and PNG or JPEG. And it says to GitHub, but this is actually inside Rankin. Okay, step two is to actually implement the database. Create a script named schema.txt that creates indexes and populates collections with data. Create one index. It says 4 hours. I don't think it's going to take 4 hours. In fact, this first exercise took us closer to 1 hour, but you know, double it in case, so estimate 2 hours. I think that's reasonable. When a teacher does it in 1 hour, students do it in 2. Let's move on to implementing the database, and that's going to be done on the Mongo Atlas. So I will, for now, close Oomlet, and MongoDB. Let's sign in. Okay, so what we're doing with this next piece is we're actually going to create our first draft of the database, and we're going to do so using the Mongo shell, and we're going to create it in a script so that we could essentially you know drop a collection and then just recreate it with the script. And so basically it's really not too complicated of an assignment. We have to create one index for each collection. So again, what are we going to be reading a lot of when you're creating an index for something? It's basically how to look something up fast. And so when you're going to look a user up by their email address, we're probably going to create an index on the email address. For a bug, how are we going to look up a bug? Well, maybe you're looking up a bug by its I don't know, status or something, right? So we're going to create an index maybe on status if you want to see all the open bugs or something like that. And so we're going to insert at least 2 documents into each collection. And so again, kind of logging in here. Let's let's browse collections on cluster 0, and this was demo database, right? So our data is all here. I'm going to operate at the terminal because we've been doing a lot with that. So let's click on connect and shell and copy. And paste that in. Pull up my password. Okay, so show DBs shows everything that's on here. This is my cluster 0. Now if I kind of back out here, keep in mind we have organizations and we have projects. You may, my Mflix project is actually what I did to create this cluster 0. And on cluster 0 are where I have all my sample data, and that's currently what I'm connected to. You can, it's really up to you. There's 10 databases here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then in those databases, each one has a bunch of collections. So whether I guess the point that I want to point out here is that if I back out here, you may choose to make a new project for your issue tracker. In fact, let's do that. I'll go ahead and delete this issue tracker because I've done this before. Let me see. So what you would do is what I just did, is create a new project, and project names have to be unique within the organization. So for you, issue tracker, I'll just call this V2. Issue tracker V2. You would just be issue tracker. That way it's separated out from your sample data. Issue tracker V2. And sure, I'm the owner. Create project. What I worry about is you only get so much free stuff, and I'm kind of just making sure. Okay, so now there's no database here yet, and so let's build a database and choose the free AWS Virginia cluster 0. And you've done this once before, we'll just do it again. Click create. I'm going to close this prompt. Okay, so I'm going to pull this off, and well, here we'll regenerate that, auto generate secure password, copy that, same username, and my local environment, add my current IP, and we're going to click create user. I'm going to click finish and close. Go to databases. Okay, so you can see it's spinning up. So you're just going to need to save that username and password. You're going to need to add your IP address through the firewall. And we're going to connect now to this different project, what I just called Issue Tracker V2. So it's just separating it out from your sample data. And now we're going to click on connect through the shell, copy that into the command prompt, paste the new password. Let's see if we get in. All right, we're in. If I show DBs, we don't have anything. So let's use DB issue tracker. That's not what I wanted. So let's use issue tracker. That's what I wanted. So you could see it was going to create a database called issue tracker. That's not what I wanted. Let's do a command that we learned yesterday, to do an insert one db users collection. Again, what I'm going to do is kind of pull up my picture and kind of reference that for my dummy data. DB users insert one. Whoop. The ID will be generated for me, and so we'll do email. For now, our password will be plain text. We'll learn how to hash that. Password. And I don't have any created bugs yet, so I'm just going to leave that created bugs maybe empty, or you could say null. There's created bugs as such. Now, the next thing to do is save this command. And so once you have that and it inserts a user, we're going to save this into a text file, that you can submit. And so, again, kind of going back to the lab, create a script named schema.txt to create indexes and populate collections with data. And so I'm going to do file, save as, and let's go desktop. I'm going to go into my lab02 folder. This is schema.txt. And that's the first command that I use. Now, you could do an insert many, you could do an insert one, I'm just doing one at a time. And so if I just clear the screen and I show collections, I now have a users collection, db users find, and you can see that the data has been inserted. Now if I kind of go back here and I browse my collections, I've got my issue tracker database, and I've got my users collection with my data in there. And so once we have one user, we can basically run that same command again. And I'm just going to hit the up arrow and change some of the data. I see a mistake that I made, and so full name, given name, I didn't do the family name. And so let me undo here. I'm going to show you a neat little trick here. Up arrow. Okay, so we're going to do another insert one, and after given name we'll do there we go. Okay, now if I refresh, you're going to see I'm put in there twice. And db users, delete one, underscore ID, colon, object ID, parenthesis, quote, paste. Okay. There we go. In my text document, I'm going to actually modify this. So I'm going to kind of copy this command that worked with all of the data, copy that and replace this, save that. Now I've got the family name in there. I'm also, at the beginning, I'm going to add the underscore ID. And I'll explain this here. Underscore ID, colon, object ID, comma. If I run this script, let me back up. if I run this in the future, if I do db users find, this is the object ID that Mongo created for me. And by pasting that in right here, it'll create the same object ID for me next time if I decide to run this as a script. This same user will be created with that same ID, which is nice, so it doesn't like auto-generate a new ID every time. So I can kind of hard code the object ID of the user once I've got the good user in there. So now let's kind of go back and find this. Now I can make some changes. And let's pick a different role. Going back to our picture, or our requirements, what are our roles? Let's do technical manager, capital T, capital M. Okay, so we can copy this object ID here. So let's copy this first. Copy the full command, paste that into our answers. And let's add in the underscore ID, object ID. And now we can copy this out. Paste right there. And now we can run these two commands and get the same users with the same IDs multiple times, even if we drop the users collection. So let's kind of come back here and refresh. There we go. We can see created bugs as an array. It's just an empty array because we haven't created any bugs yet. And let's do a drop on the collection. So I'm going to do db users drop. Okay. Show collections. So we got rid of our users. So now let's just copy and paste these two commands back in. Copy. And I had to hit enter, but presumably db dot show collections, db.users.find, just showing you that you can recreate those users with the same object IDs by, copy and pasting the commands. Okay. Next would be to create the bugs. And I think I've given enough, Grant. Are you willing and able to kind of do the inserts on the bugs? Just get a couple bugs inserted?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I'm going to let you do a little coding and I'm going to pause and then we'll come back with your solution, okay?
Okay.
Cool. Okay, I know Grant's working. I wanted to go ahead and show you how I did an insert one on my bugs. And so we can look at multiple solutions. Here's one solution. So we now have users, and so we're able to have a user ID for our bug author, and so that's kind of one thing I want to show. So here's an insert one command, title, description, steps to reproduce. These are all strings. So properties and their strings. Created at new date. That's going to insert today's date for the date that it's created on. I put a priority of P1, again, P1, P2, P3, P4, status of open. Here's a bug author, which is an object with an object ID. This is my object ID that I was able to copy and paste into there. My full name, and so we're storing data, multiple times. Again, that's kind of the benefit of Mongo is you're not worried about just storing it once. Full name and role of developer. Again, kind of going back to here, this is the bug author property. With those three properties, your mileage may vary. You might not have those same three properties. Hours to fix is an array, an array, and test cases is empty at the moment. And so I went ahead and inserted that. Now it did give me an object ID, so when I paste that in, just like I did last time, I'll kind of start by ID colon object ID, kind of pass that in first, and copy my bug ID. Now that there is a bug uh, created, right? We know that uh, this user now has a bug, and so we could essentially push something onto this created bugs array so that this object ID, kind of showing back here, created bug has an object ID, a title, and a status. And so the next step could be to push an element onto that array. And so um, I'll go ahead and pause real quick, and then my next line on this script will be to do that so that it does that one-to-one relationship. My uh, or I should say one-to-many. My user has a bug, and so I'll show that next. Okay, um, and so now that we have a bug, we want to basically assign that bug to the user that created it. A lot of this, once we write these methods, these database methods, and we're not going to have to write these commands over and over and over again. Right now, it's a little bit repetitive, but um, so here's what I did. I updated one of my users. My user is my user object ID, and then I did a push operator um, to push an element onto an array. The the property is the created bugs property, and I pushed an object. So here's my object that I'm pushing into that array. The object ID here is the object ID of my bug. Okay, and again, duplicating the title, which is unable to log in, and duplicating the status, which is open. And so you can see here, I modified my user to now have a bug. I'm going to copy this and into my document here um, because I obviously I have to create the bug before I can assign it to the user. So let's save that. And if I go back to Mongo just to kind of show this off a little bit, I have bugs. I have one bug currently. I have two users. And now my created bugs array, uh, element number 0 is an object. And if I expand that, I can see the object ID, which matches the uh, bug ID ends in 17, bug ID ends in 17 here. So there you go. So created array, object 0, unable to log in and open. And again, the idea would be that you're displaying to your user, you're showing user data as well as all the bugs that they have created on a particular screen on your application. Um, and so now we can maybe go ahead and create our next user. So we'll do that next. Okay, so my next bug, I'll start with my first bug and I'll just back arrow and kind of edit the data. We'll say responsiveness. Call it mobile responsiveness bug. And say maybe like something like when you change the dimensions of the app, the UI breaks. The UI doesn't backslash escape. The UI doesn't Okay, I'll change the bug author to be the other user, which is Charles. Okay, looks like that worked, so let's copy that. Insert my next bug. Let's bring in the bug ID. Just right here. Now, go back to bugs. We have unable to log in, mobile responsiveness bug. Bug author is Charles Corrigan. And all we have to do is add the created bugs under Charles now. Make sure I got that bug ID copied in, that's right. So let's kind of update our different bug Now if I just up, okay. So we're going to update Charles. So let's grab Charles's ID here. Which is that. And the bug ID. Is that title. And the status of open, update 1. Looks like it worked. So let's paste in our data. Refresh. It's a given name. Okay, now you can see Charles has a created bug. There's one bug right there. And you can see that in both places, on the Atlas and on the shell. Okay, so insert at least 2 documents for each collection. The last thing is to create an index for each collection. Okay, the next part of this assignment is to create an index. We created an index yesterday. You can kind of see db dot, for example, your users collection, create index on the keys. And so, for our users, let's just go ahead and say, username and password. We'll create an index on those. Maybe we'll just start with username to keep it simple. You can also provide some options, and I wanted to dive a little bit into some options, which is a document, which is optional. So the required part is the keys, right? And so this is an object, and you can kind of see we'll provide the field, and we'll say, 1, we're going to index it on 1. So we'll say email :1, and that'll be how we create an index that'll allow queries against the email to run quickly. So let's kind of, build that out piece at a time. And so db users find, and so you could see we have an email. So something like db dot users create index. Okay, and so the first one is the email :1, and one thing that you might want to do, if you kind of look at the options, and maybe we just run it like that, and you get email _1, and that created an index. Now I can actually go back to my users. If I click on indexes, by default the ID is indexed, but you can now see I have an email index created. Atlas, we're going to get to the point where we're working a little bit more with Atlas. You could see pretty easily you can drop the index. So if I say delete index on Mongo, of course, drop index would be the command, and drop index star. Of course, we don't want to do that. I'm sure you have to provide a name, which our name is email_1. Right, so if I do something, let's just write db users drop index, and let's look at example just in a string. Yep. So let's put it in email1. Dot, bop, bop. Okay, let's see if that worked. Refresh. Okay, that worked. So go back to my users indexes. The reason is you can also do some options, and so kind of look at this. Create index a:1. This is what we did so far. Unique true. So if you want to set it up so that users must have unique email addresses, you could provide some options in a second argument, and you could also optionally name it something different if you don't want the default name that we were given. And you could do some other neat things in here. The third option is for collation. So if we kind of back up here, this collation allows you to do like case insensitive indexes. And so, if a user searches for capital Bob, but you're stored in your database as lowercase Bob, it would match. And so we'll look into that. But for now, let's just do a create index with a unique true. So it's pretty simple. We'll kind of go back to our create index. Email1 provided a second object unique of true. And so that'll make it a unique index, so email addresses have to be unique. There we go. And there's our email1, and there you could see unique email. So go ahead and try and insert another user with the same email address, and you're going to get an error message from the database, which is kind of what we want. When it comes to bugs, okay, so let's copy this. This is our create index into our lab. And let's do one on bugs. How might we look up data with bugs? Let's go to our bugs collection. Well, it's already, again, on bugs, by default there's an index on the ID, so we remember that. I would assume we do a lot of looking up bugs by their object IDs. Let's make one on status. Let's just make it on status. Maybe you want to read all of the bugs that are open in the system. So I think that makes sense. So it's pretty simple to db bugs create index status : 1. Of course, that's not going to be unique. And let's hit that. Status 1. Bingo. Let's copy that command. into our file, save it, and back to our lab. We have now completed exercise 2. Exercise 3 is more practice with your queries. Grant, I do think this would be a good place. I know I said last time I'll let you do the work and then show it off, but let's do that this time, okay?
Okay.
So this is a new file called queries.txt. So you're going to have in your folder, we'll make a new text file. So mine was desktop repos here, lab 2. We'll make a new folder or new file, text document called queries.txt. We'll open that up and solve these problems. List all the bugs that your user created. List all the bugs that you're assigned to. List all the bugs, so on and so forth. Okay, we'll pause and come back and kind of take a look at the answers to these 12 queries. Okay, we're back recording, and so we've got Grant who kind of finished up his queries, and I'll let him take the control.
Okay, so this is on exercise 3. The first one was to list all of the bugs that your user created, and that was just using the find with the, I chose to use the bug author ID as the search. And that would be the first one, and it's looking the ID of bug author.
Looks good to me. Now, again, your queries may vary if you didn't structure your data the way that Grant did. But he has a bug author and a bug author object underneath it. So bug author.id equal to, bingo, number 2.
So number 2 is pretty similar. It's going through bugs and it's just finding we have an object that is the assigned to property, and that's searching through that. And so this comes up with a different bug. Because instead of the bug author, which in this case is Evan Goodmestead, it's the assigned to developer, which is my name.
Very nice. Number 3, list all of the bugs that you created or are assigned to.
So this one was a little bit more complicated because you had to basically combine the last 2 problems into one. And for that, I went onto MongoDB's website and found the OR operator. And then you basically search through that twice where you're using the bug author.id that I did in the first one, and then the assigned to ID, and using the same object ID for both of those. So that looks like this. So you're using the OR selector right there, and then it's the same object ID, but one is searching for if it's the bug author and the other is the assigned to.
Very nice.
And that comes up with both of the bugs that we looked at before.
Great. And number 4.
This one was a simple listing all the bugs that are unclassified. So to make sure that the classification was set to unclassified, I think we said that would be the default, but I went and entered that into my bugs. So then other than that, it's a simple using the equals operator.
So to repeat, you had to actually mark some as unclassified, right?
Yes, because I think we just had blank classification, or it might not have been.
Right.
I entered it in our, I think in the instructions at one point it said that that would be a default
Yep.
if nothing else was entered, but that wasn't done yet.
Yep.
And there's the classification there.
Great. Number 5, list all of the bugs that have been approved by by a business analyst but are now closed.
So this one first had to change the classification to approved. And then I think that we were setting the status to open on all of them by default. So this was using the AND operator to make the status equal to open and the classification equal to approved. And I don't know why it's not wanting to copy and paste again.
It can be a pain sometimes, can't it?
There it goes. And the status is open and the classification is approved on that one.
Great. 6, list all of the bugs that are fixed but are not closed.
So for this one, it's kind of like the last problem, just with an extra step where you're using a $not to make it not equal to closed. And then I added an is fixed section of my document that I made equal to true on one of my bugs. And so that's what that looks like. So status is not equal to closed. And then also looking for once that is fixed is equal to true.
So you added the property is fixed on one of your bugs?
Yes.
Which is fine. Another way of assessing that would be if all the test case were passed.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, multiple ways of doing that, and your solution's fine.
And now this comes back and status is open. So that looking at making sure that it was not equal to closed was working, and is fixed is towards the bottom. That is true.
Looking good. And let's see. 7, list all the bugs that do not have steps to reproduce.
So this one, it was using the exist equals false, which I don't think that we've used before. And I originally just did that. So just finding steps to reproduce that didn't exist essentially, but it was coming back with the empty arrays as well. And so I added the or operator and added another condition that steps to reproduce couldn't be equal to an empty string. And all of mine, I think, have steps to reproduce in there.
Yeah. Yeah. 8, list all the bugs that do not have test cases.
This one's pretty similar to the last one, except that it's using an empty array instead of an empty string. I think this is the one where I ran into the problem where it was coming back with the empty array, even because the array technically did exist.
Right.
That wasn't very helpful, so I added the condition that it would also have to be equal, or also could be equal to the empty array. And I have 3 bugs in here, so one is being excluded because of that.
Nice. Let's see. That was 8, so 9. List all the bugs that do not have hours recorded.
And this one was about the same as the last one. because hours to fix was also an array.
Yep. 10, list all the bugs with the number of comments for each bug. This one you had to hit the docs for. I know because I had to hit the docs too.
So this is what I did first, is that I added a comment to one of mine, and because I didn't have any comments, so that's what I did.
Yep. Got to add a comment so that you can count them.
And then I don't know why that already went, but this is the solution. So using project and then making sure that the title is listed, and then the comments. This is where it got a little complicated. It was using condition, and then if there was an array of comments, then it would print out the amount of objects within that array, or the amount of comments within that array, and then otherwise it would say NA.
Yeah, so you have one bug with no comments, you have one bug with one comment, and you have one bug with two comments, correct?
Yes.
Bingo. And so yeah, that literally, if you look up the $size operator, you're going to find on the MongoDB docs this project uh, that belongs inside of an aggregate array. So that's kind of the reference that we used. And then the next one was very similar, but instead of a $size, it was $sum. So that's number 11. List all the bugs with the total number of hours worked on each bug.
And I actually also I just had the size, so that was an error on my part.
Yeah, if you change, all you have to do is change size to sum.
And I didn't realize that ended up being a thing because I don't have stuff in those arrays.
Oh, you don't have any hours on any of them? Okay, your query is good though. And finally, list all the bugs with failing test cases.
So first had to add the test cases object within one of my bugs, and doing that using a test name, and then the created on with a new date, and then I added a boolean pass and made this one equal to false. So this should only be locating the one bug that has that test cases dot pass equal to false.
Beautiful. All right, Grant, thank you for that exercise 3. Now, what we'll do here is we got about an hour left on today. We'll go ahead and work through this, and once we get the final 8 answers, we'll make a separate video for that because we're kind of wrapping up at the end of today. And right now, in your lab, you should have a queries.txt. You should have your Oomlet. Oh, do you want to show your updated picture for your database diagram? Because didn't you update that?
Yeah.
Talk about what you added. Because again, this is going to be a growing document. I think we realized we forgot something.
Yeah, so I think the only thing that I ended up adding was the comments array at the bottom.
Yep.
The bottom of bugs.
comments array. Yep. It's an array of type string. Yep. Um, and then you added a is fixed, I think. So maybe that'll be something else that you add to your bug.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically here on this diagram, we updated that to have an array of comments on the bugs. Great. And okay, good job. And we'll kind of resume this tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.